Well, good afternoon, everybody. Just afternoon. Thank you so much for having me with you today. What I'm going to do over the coming minutes is to share with you some work we've been doing over the last 6 months to really try to understand how people around the world are feeling today. And in many ways, it links with some of the things that we've heard earlier. Cedar talked a bit about change, and change often being unexpected. And Jackie talked about how we can get closer to people. So when we've been looking at the results that I'm going to share with you now, our 3 themes were fragmentation, cohesion, and uncertainty. And those felt to us to be the best ways of describing the way that people around the world are feeling. So this is very much a survey, a piece of work which is where there are no right or wrong answers. It's very much going out there and finding out how people are responding and reacting to, let's say, what they see around them, what they're experiencing in their lives, and what they're worried about in the future. Because many of these mega trends, as they're called, are now pretty well established. And we're talking about, of course, many things today. Some of those are how we, for example, can apply the technological change that we're seeing in our research. We've also got climate change and issues around sustainability. I heard a bit about that a little bit before the break, didn't we? But in essence, we have a consensus that we are living through some changes, let's say, in our climate and a need to adapt. Political change, we'll come on to that, but a world where the United States, let's say, is not quite the dominant superpower that it perhaps was. Economic growth being uneven, not just between countries, but often within an individual country. Population change. We're starting to see population growth slow down in many countries, including this one, but we still have, if you like, some uncertain territory to go in terms of how quickly populations are going to change, and also adapting to the aging population. And of course, globalization and migration needs very little introduction. So what have we done? Well, we've done a survey around the world, 18,000 people. It builds on one that was done 3 years ago. There are 23 countries. Turkey is, of course, one of those countries. But this year also added was Mexico, Peru, and Indonesia. So we have a huge, if you like, range of things that we can draw on, and it'll all be available to you to look at after this session. And these were the things that we pulled out of the research, pulled out of the results. The first, this crisis, if you like, and it does feel like a crisis for the elites, politicians, governments, big business. Uncertainty about where things are going. The battle for attention and a need for us to have perhaps more simplicity, or in theory anyway, we'd like more simplicity in our lives. The rise of tradition, actually, against all of this change. Many people want to see things perhaps a little bit more like what they knew when they were growing up. We've also got questions around new generations, particularly the younger people who, if you like, are perhaps starting out in their working lives, starting new families, starting out in the world, if you like, and what pressures do they face. We've got some questions about health, and I've seen how keen you are on fitness here, at least in this room. And we've also got some questions around this, how optimistic we can or should be about our lives. So those are our 8 trends that we're going to talk about today. The first one is this question about the elites. Now, I must apologize, most of my slides have numbers on them. This one, of course, doesn't. This was, of course, entirely unexpected. In Turkey, we did a survey last year. 26% of people in Turkey thought that Donald Trump would be elected. Turkish people actually did rather well. Many countries had it below 20%. My own country, the UK, was, I think, 18%. The only country which predicted the victory were people living in Russia. Now, if we wanted to understand this, we perhaps could do a lot worse than look at this particular slide. This is the views of people around the world. And I pause for a moment because sometimes we shouldn't be generalizing. We should be looking at particular groups or particular segments of the population that we're trying to understand. However, my government does not prioritize the interests of people like me. The average person in the world says they don't. The economy is rigged for the advantage of the rich and powerful. 76% of people around the world think things are fixed against them. You might put some economists in a room and tell them, actually, what are you saying here? You've got a nice car, you've got a nice life. How can you say the economy is rigged? That's what they think. There are no right or wrong answers in this survey. This is what people think. Even the Swedes feel that the economy is rigged in favour of the rich and powerful. Or another one, much talked about now, are these questions about experts. Experts don't understand my life. I'm feeling something different to what people are telling me about it. So we see this all around the world, questions particularly not just about government, but about business. But at the same time, as we go through the findings, we also find people actually quite attached to many of the brands that they buy, attached to places like supermarkets, many opportunities to, if you like, show people that, if you like, you're an organisation that is in touch with the way they live their lives, and it is providing them with something that's giving them, if you like, something to enrich their lives. But the basic starting point is people do not feel good about their governments and about where they're going. Second point is getting used to this theme of uncertainty. Again, who thought we would have this kind of, let's say, experience happening in international relations a year ago that we do now? It really is something which we're all having to adapt and get used to. I'm not saying the world was always predictable previously, but certainly the people we're interviewing around the world are finding this a little bit faster and at times a little bit harder to adapt than perhaps it was. So it's perhaps no surprise that 8 in 10 people around the world agree that they live in an increasingly dangerous world. Now, again, we might put some so-called experts in a room and tell them that actually, no, things are getting better in many parts of the world. Crime rates, for example, are falling. You shouldn't be saying this. But this is what people are seeing, and if you look at the list of countries down the list, each of them has their own, let's say, pressure points or issues that they're dealing with, and I know we're talking, of course, later today around Syria and the impact that it's having on Turkey. This is what people think. Even China is the lowest score there, but it's still 60% of people are saying we're living in a dangerous world. So there's that. There's also worrying about things. So technology is the kind of thing that we have a sort of mixed relationship with. We admit to ourselves that I couldn't do without my phone or my internet, but at the same time, people worry that perhaps it's taking something away, something good from my life. Even the millennials, who are supposed to be the group who are most, if you like, technologically savvy or most into the new possibilities that technology brings, are feeling, if you like, rather less positive at times about what technology might be bringing that's a bad thing, if you like, or that's taking something away. It's not all gloom and doom. Many people think that actually, in the long term, some things are going to get better. Don't know how, not quite sure when, but eventually all medical conditions will be curable. Many, many people around the world are thinking that, and clearly that the pace of change is also helping us do some things for the good. We'll talk about healthcare in a moment, but of course some of the positive, if you like, trends when we look back at the world of the last 10 or 20 or 30 years are around healthcare and improvements in those kinds of outcomes. So it's not all bad, but uncertainty does feel like what we're all having to live with and adjust to. We're also, or at least some of us are, struggling with our attention spans. I'm going to have to spend a moment, I'm not with my phone for 30 minutes now. I'm struggling perhaps to cope with that. And that is something which communications people, marketing people are having to adapt to as they understand where people are. It's well documented, of course, that these marketing and communications people have so many more things that they can use to communicate and get their message across and really bond with a particular segment or target group that they want to get in touch with. And indeed, it's worth reminding ourselves that some of the traditional forms of communications, television, radio, and newspapers, aren't actually going away either. There's just more stuff. And the challenge, of course, is how, if we're involved in communicating with people and trying to get our messages across, how do we do that in a way that connects, and in a way that connects, let's say in an emotional way, or in a way that's going to drive me to perhaps think differently, or more importantly, act differently, given that, let's say, my attention may not always be fully focused on the messages that they're trying to get across to me. So we do have this question, if we're trying to communicate with people, of how do we keep their attention and get them to really, if you like, take in what we're getting across. The figure in Turkey of 66% constantly looking at the screens these days is replicated around the world. A number of surveys have suggested that the amount of times on average that we look at our phone is over 200 a day. That's the average. So some people are perhaps in the 400s or the 500s. So if you're trying to communicate, we're trying to get the message across, we really have to think through how best we do that. Certainly when we ask people, they tell us it's not always working for me. I'm often receiving irrelevant stuff. Why is that appearing on my timeline? Why is that appearing on my Facebook feed? And many people tell us that they are now taking active steps to block the adverts that are coming to me. And certainly a lot of the work that we've been starting to do in recent years, which we of course didn't do prior to digital advertising, is how, for example, can you get your message across most effectively within the first 5 seconds. Often it used to be about having a really nice pace, and then at the end the excitement mounts and you have a really great takeaway in your mind about that particular piece of advertising or communications. The fourth area, and I guess links with that clutter, if you like, all of this stuff that's being fired at us in our lives, is this question around simplicity and control. Certainly when we ask people, I wish my life was more simple. And it comes on to some of these questions around often looking back and thinking previous years, previous decades, depending on how old we were perhaps better than they are now. But generally around the world, we think our life, I wish it was more simple. One of the questions that that raises is how quickly can businesses, if you like, respond to that? And certainly we're seeing some sectors which I think are quite interesting are taking that desire for simplicity and, if you like, running with it. One example is banking, where many banks now are starting to rationalize the number of accounts that are available for people. So there are just, let's say, 3 or 4 accounts rather than a whole range of different things that I could get involved in. Another one is actually on the supermarket shelves. We're seeing the ranges on many supermarket shelves around the world changing and actually contracting. An example is jam, which now often you may only see 6 or 8 different types of jam. And what we found is that you can sell more by having a smaller range, that I can concentrate on that and just get the one I want, rather than have the amazing range which modern supply chains could bring to me in that particular store. So certainly we're seeing examples of how companies, I think, are successfully thinking about this and thinking about what it means for their own business and their own products and their own services, and how they can, if you like, be successful in this kind of environment. The fifth thing that we drew out was this issue around tradition, and I've referenced it a couple of times already, but there's certainly a strong sense among many people around the world that we've kind of maybe lost something. If not quite a sense of mourning, it can get, I think, towards that compared with what we see today. I would like my country to be the way it used to be. Now, as you'll see here, there are some big variations along by country here, and there are some more I'll show you later where we go into even more differences by country. But many countries around the world, the United States, coming back to my earlier picture, 69% of people would like their country to be the way it used to be. And certainly America First was drawing into that kind of mindset. Of course, Turkey at 58%, you're a little bit around the middle. My own country, Britain, is about 50%, 49%. Not that many countries going below 40% of people wanting to see things as they were. But what do I mean by that? What am I talking 10 years ago, 20 years ago? Am I thinking about it to a particular point in time? Or is it actually more of a kind of a general sense that just it used to be better and it isn't now? Certainly we're finding it's quite a complex area to explore, and particularly if you're trying to think about what this might mean for your own messaging and your own work, I think that's important to not think of it as a simple issue. So yes, 80% agree traditions are an important part of society. But at the same time, it doesn't seem that people are expecting everybody to go back and, if you like, let's say, conform to a set way of doing things that perhaps we used to have. The same proportion, 80%, agree it's up to everybody to work out their own set of principles, to guide their, if you like, their own decisions. So it's certainly not the case that we're finding when we're going out and, if you like, trying to find out where people are today, that they're looking, for, if you like, for all for the same thing. But that desire for tradition and perhaps that sense that we've lost something is there. We've got some questions in the survey about the roles of women. And this shows, firstly, the diversity in terms of how different countries see the roles of women in their society. This question around the role of women is to be good mothers and wives. Globally, 37% think that's the case, but as you see, it varies very significantly by country. But at the same time, 57% think that things would work rather better if there were more women who held positions with responsibilities in government and in companies. And that figure, if you look down the chart, is now over 50% for around 18 of the countries where we've asked that question. So again, people often, I think, have a very nuanced picture. It may be contradictory. There may be some people who both think that women should be wives and mothers and should be holding more positions of responsibility. But these are the kinds of, if you like, contrasts that we have to understand if we're trying to get closer to where people are today. It's a reminder, though, of the complexity the minute we're trying to understand perhaps the values that people have and where they're coming from and the frame through which they see the world. The sixth area is, we call it generation strains, because there are issues around the new generations, if you like, who are coming into the world today. And there are contrasts with their experiences, of course, with those who, if you like, have been around for a little longer. And we've asked one question, which I think is perhaps one of the most important in the whole survey. In fact, I might just take this one away with me if you only allow me to show you one slide. To what extent do you feel that today's youth will have had a better or worse life than their parents, or will it be about the same? Now, we have 4 of the world's most populous countries feeling pretty positive about the opportunities that today's youth have. China and India, of course, with population over 1 billion. Indonesia, more than 250 million. Brazil, similar in terms of population size. So in many of the, if you like, the big powerhouse economies, certainly of today's world and definitely of tomorrow's world, there is optimism. If I take a flight from here for 2 or 3 hours, Britain, Spain, Belgium and France, complete opposite. And certainly some of the things that we've seen recently with the Brexit referendum that we saw in the UK or in the French referendum, some of this kind of mood music, this sense that perhaps we're not going in the way that we would like, is very much here. And it's also a reminder for me that in all of the kind of work that we might do around global trends and international networked organizations and internationally networked people, it's often important to get back and think about the individual country and the mindset of people living in that country. If I may give you one example, only one I promise, from my country, we are very worried about our kids, okay? The problems we have, and these are middle-class problems of middle-class Britain. The majority of people, though, are that young people are now having to pay to go to university, and they end up with debts. Secondly, when they leave university, they don't get as good jobs as they used to because more people are now going to university, and so they can't walk into a great job. And then finally, when they do get the job, they can't buy the house because house prices are so large, and most people can't start until maybe they're 30 or 35. This is a national crisis. Now, other people looking at this, again, from their observation room might say, what are you talking about? You are a rich country. These are the problems of rich people. You should not call this a national crisis. You should calm down and just work this through. So many other problems in the world. But that is the kind of thing that people in Britain might tell us. And many of those countries, perhaps towards the foot of the table, would have a similar experience. So getting this sense of where people are coming from remains such an important thing if we're going to understand what they're feeling now and what they're going to do in the future. Whether that what they're going to do is how they're going to vote, or what they're going to do is which products or services they're going to buy. Now, we heard before the break how healthy you in this room at least want to be. Certainly, as I mentioned, some of the successes we've had around healthcare outcomes are one of the great changes I think we have seen, including over the last 10 years that CEDAR looked back on at the beginning. But it's worth reminding ourselves also that we largely do get it now around the world. We get it that eating right is now a pretty critical thing that I can do. We get it that we, if you like, need to think about our weight, and it's not a good thing to neglect, if you like, what's going into our bodies. We also are starting, I would say, rather than doing day in, day out, assert, if you like, ourselves in terms of the healthcare that we want to receive. So around the world, 77% now saying they want more control over their healthcare. If I didn't agree with the doctor I saw the first time, I'd get a second opinion. And this is a nice example of, if you like, where perhaps people are in their own mindset is chiming potentially with where they need to be, and it's certainly chiming with where the healthcare system knows they need to be, in the sense that many of us, if you like, as we're aging, as people are living longer, having to deal with longer-term chronic conditions, the more, if you like, we are put in charge of our own, if you like, medication, and there are new devices and technology developments, of course, help us in that, the better that is, if you like, for the healthcare sector to be able to cope. Because certainly in some countries around the world, we're finding real gloom and uncertainty about whether the quality of healthcare actually offered to their family is going to be able to improve over the coming years, given the levels of demand that are, if you like, coming their way. Turkey, on balance, more optimistic than some other countries, but again, you have a significant number of people who are really questioning actually about where this is going, and will we be able to, 1 in 5 people now saying, will we be able to keep the same level or the same types of healthcare than we have at the moment. Now, my final sort of theme, if you like, coming out of this survey is this question about optimism and about how we feel about, if you like, where we're going. And this is the one question where, and you're very kind to me, I must thank you for listening to me in English, the one question where I say we need to look very much at the grammar being used here. So this question is about globalization. Now, we could have a whole conference probably about globalization and how it's actually not a new thing. It's been going on for thousands of years. We're using the wrong words here. But let's just say we're looking at it through, if you like, a more of a current context in terms of the interdependent world that we're living in, the fact that things like iPhones are now available pretty much in all countries around the world. The reason I wanted to mention my grammar is around using the present tense. Globalization is good for my country, and we can see at least 3 segments of countries here. We have India and China are saying, yes, it's good. Things are going in the right direction. We have countries in Europe like France and Belgium and Italy saying, oh, this is a bad thing. What I'm used to, what I cherish about, if you like, my life or my country is at threat. And we have some countries, Britain is one, Turkey is one, Canada is another, where actually it's a little bit more nuanced, and different people will be taking different things from what they're seeing around them. Certainly, we're seeing around the world big differences, both within countries in terms of how people are seeing, if you like, the changes that are happening around them. And certainly that was a theme that we saw in my own country, Britain, when we had the referendum on the European Union. But if I were to, for a moment, drop some of the European countries, they are, after all, Russia, Spain, Italy, France and Belgium, barely 10% of the world's population, and actually concentrate my thinking on where the most people live in the world. One of the things that we're finding when we're looking to the future is this drive that people have. And I guess one of the things that we're taking from this is it's actually a sense that These changes can be for the good, and many people are really wanting to do what they can and get on in life, and they have a particular mindset. It means if they need to move house, or they need to move job, or maybe they need to move country, they will go on and do it. So this sense, if you like, to quote the previous US president, of yes we can, or yes I can, I think is there and found in many countries around the world, so long as I don't spend too long in Europe. Similarly, many people, as they become wealthier, they're getting more income, if you like, into their pockets or into their household. Of course, we're finding are gaining great sort of kudos, satisfaction, benefits from buying things and from purchasing things. Now, in some cases, that will be because it gives them the opportunity to do something they couldn't do before, perhaps to have a car. In other cases, it might be to show that they are successful, perhaps to have the latest iPhone. But again, we're seeing, firstly, very big differences around the world. Is the case that in China and India we're more surveying the connected consumers, the online consumers, but the big difference between, if you like, Sweden, Spain, and China and India. And again, it's a reminder, if you're doing research in particular countries, that we need just to, be clear about the global trends and the big currents and the big things that we need to be careful about, but also be thinking about what's the temperature and what's the mood of people in this country, or the people in this country that I want to target. It may, of course, be a much smaller subsection of that. So finally, my final slide is the slide which I think plays, and one of the reasons why we included cohesion as one of our themes here. Because for all the differences around the world that we may be observing in terms of some of those experiences people have and those feelings people have, when we ask people, they say, on balance, there's much more than unites us than divides us. We're finding actually people are much more happy around the world than we as people think they are. So, for example, in Turkey, you think in Turkey, across the country, 42% of your fellow countrymen and women are happy with their lives. It's actually over 80%. So for all of these changes that we're going through, as we've seen, some are good, some maybe not so good. There's some things that bring us together, whether it's about your family, your town, your work, or a general sense that actually there's something bigger here. And certainly we're finding from this survey, there is that sense of actually, on balance, there's more that unites us than divides us. So those are our themes: fragmentation, cohesion, uncertainty. It's all available for you to explore. There's a dedicated site there, and we'll be making that available to you. As I mentioned, all of these questions, we've got hundreds of questions here. We've just tried to summarize some of them here. But all of the questions include Turkey, so you can compare Turkey with other countries. You can just look at the global figures. You can just start to explore the things in more detail, and it covers a whole range of things, including shopping and brands and advertising, governments, whatever topic you're interested in. I hope there's something there for you. And it's one of those kinds of questions. Depending on whether you're an optimist or a pessimist, you could draw a completely different presentation from these findings. And actually, so in a way, it's unsummarizable. But I'd like to finish, I suppose, by saying we've seen over the years, over the decades, over the centuries that people adapt. I think this gives us a good sense of what they're worried about, perhaps particularly a sense that maybe I've lost something, but you also get from it a sense of drive and to a degree a sense of optimism, which means that provided, let's say, nothing too untoward happens on the international security scene, perhaps we can at least have some cautious optimism about where things might be going, and I hope this information will help you explore and, if you like, get a little bit closer to the themes or the people or the countries that you want to find out more about. So thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.